Sir, I need you to exit this cabin immediately. First class is reserved for our premium members, and frankly, you don't fit the profile. The words didn't come out as a question. They came out as a command, sharp and deliberate, projected loud enough for every passenger in first class to hear. Captain Victoria Ashford stood in the aisle of the aircraft, one hand on her hip, the other holding a passenger manifest tablet like a weapon. She was 47 years old, platinum blonde hair pulled back into a sleek low bun without a single strand out of place. Her Navy Apex Airlines captain uniform tailored to fit like it had been designed specifically for her body. 4 gold stripes adorned her shoulders. Diamond stud earrings caught the cabin light. Her makeup was flawless, her posture commanding, her ice blue eyes locked onto the man sitting quietly in seat 2A. Darius Bennett, 38, looked up from his tablet. He was a black man wearing a simple black polo shirt and dark jeans. No designer logos, no flashy jewelry, just a basic silver watch on his wrist and wireless earbuds dangling from his collar. His carry-on bag, a plain black duffel, sat tucked under the seat in front of him. He had calm brown eyes that had seen this kind of moment before, a composed expression that gave nothing away, and the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every single thing he owned. Captain Ashford looked at him like he was a problem that needed solving. She didn't ask politely. She didn't lower her voice. She made sure everyone around them could hear her challenge his right to be there. What Captain Victoria Ashford didn't know, what none of the crew members standing behind her knew, what not a single passenger in that first-class cabin could have guessed, was that the man she was about to humiliate in front of dozens of witnesses would, in exactly 8 months, own the entire airline. He would fire her personally. He would restructure the company from the ground up, and he would make sure that what happened tonight could never happen to anyone else again. Before we get into what happens next, I want to know where you're watching from right now. Drop your city in the comments below. And if this moment hit you the way it's about to hit every passenger on this flight, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like. Every story we share here matters, and I need you to be part of this journey. Now let's rewind and see exactly how this night began. It was 8:45 p.m. on a Thursday evening at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. Flight 828 to Los Angeles sat at Gate C 17 engines. Humming softly, cabin lights glowing warm against the darkness outside. The first-class section held 16 seats, arranged in a 2-2 configuration, each one upholstered in charcoal gray leather with gold accent stitching. Overhead compartments gleamed. The air smelled faintly of leather cleaner and the lavender-scented towels flight attendants handed out during boarding. Outside the windows, the New York City skyline stretched into the distance. Office buildings lit up like a circuit board, the city alive and indifferent to the small dramas playing out inside the aluminum tube, preparing for departure. Passengers settled into their seats, adjusting pillows, opening laptops, scrolling through phones, ordering drinks from attendants who moved through the cabin with practiced smiles. The atmosphere was one of quiet luxury. This was the space people paid extra for, the reward for long hours and successful careers, the buffer between them and the chaos of economy class. Conversations were muted. Laughter was polite. Everyone here understood the unspoken rules of first-class decorum. Be comfortable, but not too comfortable. Be present, but not intrusive. Exist in your bubble of privilege without acknowledging the bubbles around you. At least that was the idea. Darius Bennett sat in seat 2A, right by the window, watching the ground crew load luggage into the cargo hold below. He was 38 years old, 6'1", with an athletic build that came from early morning gym sessions before the rest of the world woke up. His skin was a deep brown, his hair cut short and neat, his beard trimmed close to his jawline. He wore a black polo shirt that fit well but wasn't tailored, dark blue jeans that were clean but not designer, and white leather sneakers that had seen a few miles but were still in good shape. No Rolex on his wrist, no Hermes belt, no Gucci loafers. Just a basic silver watch he'd bought at a department store 5 years ago, and still wore because it kept accurate time. His wireless earbuds were a popular brand, but not the luxury model. His phone case was plain black rubber. His duffel bag, tucked under the seat in front of him, had no logo, no brand name, nothing that screamed wealth or status. To anyone glancing at him, Darius looked like someone who'd maybe gotten a good deal on a first-class upgrade. Someone using miles. Someone who didn't quite belong in this section but had lucked into it somehow. They would be wrong. Darius Bennett was the founder and CEO of Bennett Capital Group, a private investment firm that managed a portfolio worth $4.2 billion. He personally held assets valued at $680 million. He owned stakes in 27 companies across technology, manufacturing, real estate, and logistics. He had started with a $50,000 loan from his grandmother 15 years ago, and built an empire through strategic acquisitions, disciplined reinvestment, and an ability to see value where others saw risk. But he didn't advertise it. He didn't wear his wealth like armor. He moved through the world quietly, preferring to let his work speak louder than his wardrobe. He'd flown first class hundreds of times. He'd sat in boardrooms with billionaires. He'd negotiated deals that moved markets. And through it all, he'd learned that power didn't need to announce itself. Tonight, he was reading investment reports on his tablet, reviewing quarterly earnings for a manufacturing company he was considering acquiring. He'd ordered a bottle of water when the flight attendant came by, declining the champagne. He wanted to stay sharp. The reports were dense, full of data, and he liked losing himself in numbers. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't judge. Numbers were clean. He had no idea that in the next 5 minutes his entire trajectory would shift. Seat 1. A held Daniel Kim, 42, a Hispanic man with graying temples and an easy smile. He was the founder of a successful mobile app development company based in San Francisco, wearing an expensive cashmere sweater and designer jeans that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His laptop was open, showing slides for a pitch deck he'd be delivering in Los Angeles tomorrow. His wife and 2 kids were back in economy, traveling on miles he'd accumulated over years of business trips. He'd used those miles to upgrade himself, a small, guilty pleasure he allowed once a quarter. Daniel was the kind of person who noticed things. He watched people. He read body language. And when Captain Ashford walked into first class and stopped at row 2, he sensed the shift in energy immediately. Seat 3B held Lauren Mitchell, 35. A white woman with sharp features and sharper instincts. She was a corporate attorney for a Manhattan law firm specializing in employment discrimination cases. She wore a tailored business suit, a Hermes scarf draped around her neck, and carried a leather briefcase that held 3 active case files she planned to review during the flight. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional ponytail. Her glasses were designer frames. She looked like someone you didn't want to face in a courtroom. Lauren was returning from depositions in New York, exhausted but wired. She'd spent the day questioning witnesses, dismantling weak testimonies, building a case that would likely settle before trial. She was good at her job. She believed in justice, even if that belief sometimes felt more theoretical than practical. She'd seen too many cases settled quietly, too many victims silenced with non-disclosure agreements, too many powerful people walking away from consequences. Tonight, she was about to witness something that would test every principle she claimed to stand for. Seat 4D held Robert Hayes, 61, a white man with silver hair, and the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not beaches. He was a retired executive from a competing airline, now spending his days consulting and his evenings drinking scotch on his back porch in Connecticut. He wore a polo shirt with his old company's logo embroidered on the chest and khaki pants that had seen better days. He recognized some of the Apex crew from industry conferences over the years. He knew how airlines worked, how hierarchies functioned, how power protected itself. Robert was a skeptic by nature. He'd seen corporate promises of diversity and inclusion come and go like seasonal marketing campaigns. He'd watched airlines issue public apologies while privately continuing the same practices. He didn't expect much to change because, in his experience, not much ever did. But tonight was going to surprise him. Seat 5C in the galley area was technically crew space, but standing there was Nina Rodriguez, 29, a Hispanic flight attendant with 5 years at Apex Airlines. She had dark eyes, a warm smile she deployed professionally, and a growing sense of unease about what she was seeing. Nina had witnessed moments like this before. 3 years ago on a flight to Miami, Captain Ashford had questioned a Middle Eastern businessman's right to sit in first class, insisting his ticket looked fraudulent even after gate agents confirmed it wasn't. The man had been humiliated for 20 minutes before the situation resolved. Nina had said nothing. She'd regretted it ever since. Tonight, standing in the galley with a tray of champagne glasses, Nina felt that same tightness in her stomach. She watched Captain Ashford stop at row 2. She saw the look on Ashford's face, and she made a decision. She quietly pulled her phone from her uniform pocket, angled it to capture the scene, and pressed record. Seat 6A held James Patterson, 44, a white investment banker for Goldman Sachs, wearing a suit that cost more than some people's cars and a Rolex that cost more than some people's cars. He was on his phone until the last possible second, closing a deal, speaking in the clipped, efficient language of high finance. He barely noticed the other passengers. He existed in his own world, a world where he was important and everyone else was background noise. James would notice soon enough. The cabin hummed with the low vibration of idling engines. Passengers adjusted seatbelts, opened magazines, closed their eyes. The flight was scheduled to depart in 10 minutes. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. And then Captain Victoria Ashford walked into first class and stopped at seat 2A, and normal ended. Captain Victoria Ashford stood in the aisle next to row 2, holding her tablet at chest level, eyes moving between the screen and the man sitting by the window. She didn't smile. She didn't offer a greeting. She just stood there, radiating authority and judgment, her presence commanding immediate attention from everyone within 10 feet. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice pitched to Carrie. "May I see your boarding pass?" Darius looked up from his tablet, pulling out one earbud. He met her eyes with calm directness. "Of course." He reached into his jeans pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened the Airline app. His boarding pass appeared on the screen, the barcode clearly visible, his seat assignment printed in bold 2A. He held it up for her to see. Victoria took his phone without asking, examining the screen like she was inspecting a counterfeit bill. She tilted it toward the overhead light, zoomed in on the barcode, scrolled through the details. Her expression remained skeptical, lips pressed into a thin line. "This says seat 2A," she said slowly. "That's a first-class seat." Darius kept his voice even. "Yes, ma'am. That's where I'm sitting." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "And how exactly did you acquire this ticket?" Darius felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that always came when he knew where this was going. He took a slow breath, keeping his face neutral. "I purchased it 3 weeks ago. Through your airline's website." Victoria looked at him, then at the phone, then back at him. "First-class tickets are quite expensive, mister." She glanced at the screen. "Bennett, are you certain this transaction went through properly?" Around them, other passengers were starting to notice. Daniel in seat 1. A looked up from his laptop, frowning. Lauren in 3. B lowered her phone, her attorney instincts pinging. Robert in 4D leaned forward slightly, watching with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this movie before. Darius's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. "I have the confirmation email. I have the credit card receipt. I have my driver's license if you need to verify my identity. Everything about this ticket is legitimate." Victoria handed his phone back, her fingers barely touching it, like she might catch something. "That won't be necessary just yet." She crossed her arms. her body language shifting from inquiry to interrogation. "What's your occupation?" "Mr. Bennett." Darius paused. "I'm not sure how that's relevant to my seat assignment." Victoria's voice took on an edge. "I'm asking because we've had issues lately with fraudulent bookings. People using stolen credit cards, fake confirmations, trying to sneak into first class. You understand I need to protect our legitimate passengers." The words hung in the air like smoke. Legitimate passengers. The implication was clear, sharp, deliberate. Lauren, in 3B, sat up straighter, her lawyer brain immediately cataloging what she was hearing. Daniel, in 1A's, frown deepened. Nina, in the galley, kept her phone steady, recording everything. Darius looked at Victoria without blinking. "I am a legitimate passenger, Captain. My name is Darius Bennett. My ticket is valid. I paid for this seat. I have every right to be here." Victoria's smile was cold. "We'll see about that." Victoria tapped the radio clipped to her belt. "Derek, can you come back here for a moment?" Within 30 seconds, First Officer Derek Sullivan appeared from the cockpit. He was 34 white with short brown hair and a military bearing that came from 6 years in the Air Force before joining commercial aviation. He wore the same Navy uniform as Victoria, but with 3 stripes instead of 4. He looked confused as he approached. "What's the issue?" Captain Victoria gestured toward Darius with a tilt of her head. "This passenger's ticket doesn't look right to me. I need you to verify with gate services that his boarding was legitimate." Derek glanced at Darius, then at the boarding pass still visible on Darius's phone screen. Captain, the gate agent, already scanned his pass. He wouldn't be on board if there was a problem with Victoria cut him off. "Just make the call, Derek." Derek hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but pulled out his radio and switched to the gate services channel. "This is First Officer Sullivan on Flight 828. We need verification on passenger in seat 2A name." He looked at the phone screen. Darius Bennett. Around them, the tension was building. More passengers were watching now. James Patterson in 6A had finally looked up from his phone. Robert Hayes in 4D had his arms crossed, shaking his head slowly. Lauren in 3B couldn't stay quiet anymore. She leaned forward in her seat. "Excuse me, Captain Ashford. This seems unnecessary. The passenger has a valid boarding pass." Victoria turned to her with a look that could freeze water. "Ma'am, this is a crew matter. Please stay out of it." Lauren's voice stayed level but got harder. "I'm an attorney. What you're doing right now constitutes harassment and possible racial profiling. This man has shown you valid documentation." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, sit down or I'll have you removed as well." Daniel in 1A spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "Captain, I'm sitting right here." I watched him board. He went straight to his seat. "He's done nothing wrong." Victoria ignored him, focusing on Derek, who was still waiting for a response on his radio. The static crackled, then a voice came through, First Officer Sullivan, passenger. "Bennett's ticket is valid. Purchased online 3 weeks ago, confirmed booking, no issues." Derek looked at Victoria. "He's confirmed. Everything checks out." Victoria's expression didn't soften. "That doesn't mean the credit card wasn't stolen." Derek blinked. "Captain, we don't have authority to investigate." Victoria pulled out her personal phone. "Then I'll call someone who does." Victoria dialed airport security directly, not bothering to step away or lower her voice. "This is Captain Ashford, Flight 828 at Gate C-17. I need 2 officers to first class immediately. We have a passenger situation that needs to be resolved before takeoff." Darius sat perfectly still, his hands resting on the armrests, his breathing controlled. He'd been here before. Not exactly this scenario, but close enough. He knew what was happening. He knew where this was going. And he knew that nothing he said right now would change Victoria's mind. But he also knew something Victoria didn't. He had options. He had resources. And he had patience. He pulled out his own phone, keeping his movements slow and deliberate so no one could claim he was being aggressive or threatening. He opened his messages and typed a quick text to Simone Carter, his executive assistant. "It's happening. Flight 828 JFK. Document everything." 3 dots appeared immediately. Simone was always awake, always ready. Her response came in seconds. "Recording this conversation. Logging timestamps. Legal team on standby." Around the cabin, passengers were reacting in different ways. Lauren in 3B was already standing, her attorney instincts fully engaged. "Captain Ashford, I'm advising you that what you're doing is illegal. This man has valid documentation. You have no grounds to detain him or remove him from this flight." Victoria's voice turned to ice. "Ma'am, sit down right now, or you'll be the second person removed from this aircraft." Lauren didn't sit. "I want your employee number and the contact information for your supervisor. I'm filing a formal complaint with the airline, the FAA, and the Department of Transportation." Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "File whatever you want." Daniel in 1A pulled out his phone and started recording. His voice was quiet but audible. "People need to see this." Victoria spun toward him. "Sir, no recording devices on this aircraft. Put that away." Daniel kept the phone steady. "Actually, Captain, I have the right to record interactions with law enforcement and airline crew, especially when I witness what appears to be discrimination." Victoria's face flushed red. "You'll be removed too." Daniel's voice stayed calm. "Then you'll have 3 federal lawsuits instead of 1. In the galley, Nina continued recording, her hands shaking slightly, but her angle steady. She whispered into the phone, barely audible. "This is Flight 828 first class cabin. Captain Ashford just called security on a passenger who showed valid documentation. Multiple witnesses present. Recording for evidence." Robert Hayes in 4D finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent decades in the industry. "Captain Ashford, I'm a retired VP from Continental Airlines. I worked in operations for 30 years. What you're doing right now is creating massive liability for your company. You're violating at least 3 FAA regulations and probably half a dozen civil rights statutes. I strongly suggest you stand down." Victoria turned to him, her voice dripping with condescension. "Sir, I've been flying for 23 years. I know exactly what I'm doing." Robert leaned back in his seat, shaking his head. "No, Captain. You really don't." The cabin door opened and 2 airport security officers stepped into first class. Officer Marcus Wright, 39 white, with a military crew cut, and the solid build of someone who'd spent time in law enforcement. Officer Lisa Gonzalez, 32. Hispanic, sharp-eyed and clearly assessing the situation before saying a word. "Captain Ashford," Officer Wright said. "What's the situation?" Victoria gestured toward Darius like she was pointing out a stain on the carpet. "This passenger's ticket is suspicious. I need him removed from first class until we can verify his identity and payment method." Officer Gonzalez looked at Darius. "Sir, do you have identification?" Darius pulled out his wallet, calm and methodical. He handed over his driver's license, his credit card, and pulled up his boarding pass on his phone again. "Here. My license, the card I used to purchase the ticket, and my boarding pass. Everything is valid. The gate already confirmed my booking." Officer Gonzalez examined the documents carefully. She looked at the license photo, then at Darius's face, then at the credit card, then at the boarding pass. She handed everything to Officer Wright, who did the same inspection. They exchanged a glance. Officer Wright looked at Victoria. "Captain, these documents are legitimate." His boarding pass was scanned at the gate. "There's no indication of fraud or improper boarding." Victoria's voice got harder. "I don't care. I'm not comfortable having him in first class. As captain, I have final authority on passenger placement for safety reasons. Move him to economy or remove him from the flight entirely." Officer Gonzalez frowned. Captain, safety reasons require a specific threat or disruption. This passenger hasn't done anything disruptive. Victoria crossed her arms. He's making me uncomfortable. That's enough. Lauren in 3B raised her voice. Captain discomfort is not a legal standard for removal. You need reasonable suspicion of a specific safety threat or violation of airline policy. Neither exists here. Victoria didn't look at her. Officers, I'm giving you a direct order. Remove this passenger. Officer Wright hesitated. He'd been in law enforcement for 15 years before moving to airport security. He knew when something felt wrong. This felt wrong. But the captain had authority. The hierarchy was clear. He looked at Darius. Sir, I'm sorry. I need you to gather your belongings and come with us. Darius looked at Officer Wright, then at Officer Gonzalez, then at Captain Ashford. His face remained composed, but his voice carried weight. Captain Ashford, you're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your career. Victoria smirked. Is that a threat? Darius stood slowly picking up his duffel bag from under the seat. No. It's a fact. He gathered his tablet, his water bottle, his earbuds. Every movement was deliberate, unhurried, dignified. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't angry. He was simply leaving on his terms even though it wasn't his choice. As he stepped into the aisle, Daniel raised his phone higher, making sure to capture the entire scene. They're removing him. No cause, no justification, no policy violation. Just removing him because the captain decided he doesn't belong. Lauren pulled out her business card and held it toward Darius. Mr. Bennett, I'm Lauren Mitchell. I'm an attorney specializing in employment and civil rights law. If you want representation, call me. I'll work pro bono on this case. Darius took the card with a slight nod. Thank you. Robert Hayes spoke up again. Ashford, you just handed him a 7-figure lawsuit on a silver platter. Victoria ignored him, watching Darius walk toward the exit with the 2 officers flanking him. Her expression was satisfied, vindicated, like she'd just solved a problem that had been bothering her. As Darius passed row 7, a young black woman in seat 7B started crying quietly. She was Tasha Williams, 26, traveling with her white boyfriend. She whispered to him, her voice breaking, "That could be my dad, my brother. That could be me." Her boyfriend squeezed her hand. I know, this is wrong. Nina in the galley kept her phone recording as Darius walked past. She made eye contact with him for just a second, and something passed between them. An understanding, a witness, a promise that this wouldn't be forgotten. Darius walked through the jet bridge, the 2 officers on either side of him. He kept his head up, his posture straight, his expression neutral. He wasn't defeated. He was calculating. When they reached the gate area, Officer Gonzalez spoke quietly, almost a whisper. I'm sorry. This wasn't right. Darius nodded. I know. Thank you for saying that. Officer Wright looked uncomfortable. For what it's worth, sir, your documents were valid. There was no reason for removal. Darius met his eyes. Then why did you do it? Officer Wright had no answer. Back on the aircraft, Captain Victoria Ashford walked through first class like nothing had happened. She moved with the same confident stride, the same elegant posture, completely unbothered by the dozen pairs of eyes staring at her with varying degrees of disgust and disbelief. She stopped at the front of the cabin near the cockpit door. If anyone else has concerns about their seat assignments, now would be the time to speak up. Silence. But it wasn't the silence of compliance. It was the silence of witnesses deciding what to do with what they'd just seen. Victoria disappeared into the cockpit. First Officer Derek Sullivan followed her, his face troubled. Once the door closed, he spoke quietly. Captain, was that really necessary? Victoria didn't look at him, focusing on her pre-flight checklist. Yes, Derek. We have standards to maintain. Derek said nothing more, but he pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. He started typing a detailed account of what had just happened, timestamps included. He'd file a report after landing. He wasn't going to be complicit in silence. In the cabin, passengers were buzzing. Daniel immediately opened Twitter on his phone, uploading the video he'd recorded. His caption was simple and direct. Black passenger illegally removed from first class on at Apex Airlines Flight 828. Captain cited zero valid reason. This is 2024. Unacceptable. He added hashtags, hashtag Apex Airlines, hashtag racial profiling, hashtag first class, hashtag discrimination. Within 2 minutes, the tweet had 47 retweets. Lauren was on her phone too, composing formal complaints to the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and Apex Airlines corporate office. She copied and pasted the same message to each I am an attorney who witnessed illegal removal of passenger Darius Bennett from Flight 828 first class based solely on racial bias. Captain Victoria Ashford violated multiple federal regulations. I am offering pro bono legal representation to Mr. Bennett and will pursue all available legal remedies. Robert Hayes pulled out his phone and started texting contacts at Apex Airlines corporate headquarters. He knew people. He had connections, and he was furious. In 30 years of airline operations, I've never seen something this blatant, he typed. Your captain just created a PR nightmare and a legal disaster. You need to act immediately. James Patterson, the investment banker who'd been mostly oblivious until now, leaned across the aisle to Lauren. What just happened? Lauren looked at him with barely concealed contempt. What just happened is that Captain racially profiled a passenger, violated his civil rights, and opened your airline to massive legal liability. That's what happened. James blinked. Are you serious? Lauren's voice was ice. Dead serious. And you sat there and watched it happen without saying a word. James looked uncomfortable and went back to his phone, suddenly very interested in the in-flight magazine. In the galley, Nina uploaded her video to 3 different cloud storage accounts. She made copies, sent one to her personal email, another to a secure drive, and a third to an anonymous airline industry whistleblower group that monitored crew misconduct. Her hands were shaking as she typed an accompanying message. Flight 828 JFK to LAX, Captain Victoria Ashford. Wrongful removal of black passenger from first class. Multiple witnesses. Full video documentation attached. She knew she might get fired for this. She didn't care anymore. Some things were more important than job security. The plane pushed back from the gate 5 minutes later. The engines powered up. Victoria's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional, welcoming passengers aboard, thanking them for choosing Apex Airlines, wishing them a pleasant flight. In first class, nobody touched their champagne. Nobody smiled. The cabin was heavy with tension, with anger, with the uncomfortable weight of witnessing injustice and knowing you'd been part of it, even if only by proximity. Outside the window, the lights of New York began to fall away as the plane climbed into the night sky. But something else was rising too. Something Captain Victoria Ashford couldn't see yet, something building in the digital space beneath her, spreading through social media networks, igniting outrage, gathering momentum. A storm was coming, and she had no idea she was standing at the center of it. At 23 years old, Darius Bennett stood outside the Sterling Venture Capital building in Midtown Manhattan, portfolio folder clutched in his hand, wearing the only suit he owned. It was a Navy JCPenney special, bought on sale 3 years earlier for his college graduation, slightly too big in the shoulders because he'd lost weight during the final push of his senior year. The pants were hemmed by his grandmother. The shoes were polished within an inch of their life, but they were department store brand, and anyone who knew fashion could tell. He'd taken a Greyhound bus from Philadelphia the night before, unable to afford a hotel, sleeping in Penn Station on a bench with his portfolio bag tucked under his head as a pillow. He'd washed up in the station bathroom at 6 a.m., changed into his suit in a bathroom stall, and showed up at Sterling Venture Capital at 7:30 for his 9 a.m. meeting 2 hours early, because he couldn't risk being late. The meeting was the result of 6 months of cold emails, networking events, and one connection through a professor who knew someone who knew someone. Darius had a pitch for a financial technology platform that would revolutionize small business lending, making capital accessible to entrepreneurs who'd been locked out of traditional banking. He had 3 years of research beta testing with 50 small businesses in Philadelphia, proof of concept validated by 2 university economics professors, and projections showing a viable path to profitability within 18 months. He had everything except the one thing that mattered most in venture capital pedigree. The meeting room was on the 34th floor, all glass and steel and expensive furniture that whispered wealth at a frequency only certain people could hear. Lead investor Gregory Harrison. 58, white Harvard MBA, decades in venture capital, sat at the head of the table. 2 associates flanked him, both white, both wearing watches that cost more than Darius's entire wardrobe. Darius presented for 12 minutes. He walked them through market analysis, showed competitive advantages, demonstrated traction, metrics, explained revenue models. His slides were clean. His data was solid. His delivery was confident because he believed in what he'd built. Gregory Harrison never looked at the screen. Not once. He looked at Darius. Just Darius. His eyes tracked up and down, taking inventory, making assessments that had nothing to do with financial projections. When Darius finished, Harrison leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "Interesting," he said slowly, "but we don't typically invest in your demographic." Darius felt the words land like a punch. My demographic. Harrison's smile was thin. Founders without proven track records, no Silicon Valley experience, no network, no connections. You understand venture capital is about more than just good ideas. It's about cultural fit. The associates nodded their expressions carefully, neutral, saying nothing but agreeing with everything. Darius's throat tightened. "I have 3 years of validated testing. I have real users, real revenue, real growth metrics, everything you claim to look for in early-stage companies." Harrison stood, signaling the meeting was over. "And we appreciate you coming in. We'll be in touch if we see a fit." They were not going to be in touch. Darius knew it. They knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. As Darius walked out of that building, portfolio in hand, he passed 3 other founders in the lobby, all white, all male, all wearing expensive casual wear, the kind of studied carelessness that only comes with family money. They were laughing, shaking hands, talking about term sheets and valuation caps. One of them had a pitch deck that looked like it had been thrown together over coffee that morning. Darius stood on the sidewalk outside Sterling Venture Capital for 10 minutes, watching people flow past him, watching founders walk in and out with handshakes and congratulations and term sheets, watching the machine work exactly the way it was designed to work, keeping some people in and other people out. He remembered thinking, they didn't reject my business. They rejected me. That night back in Penn Station, waiting for his midnight bus to Philadelphia, sitting on the same bench where he'd slept the night before, Darius made a decision. He wasn't going to wait for people like Gregory Harrison to give him permission. He wasn't going to beg for access to rooms that didn't want him. He was going to build something so undeniable that they'd have no choice but to acknowledge him. And one day, when he had the power, he was going to make sure no one else had to sleep on a Penn Station bench waiting for a chance that would never come. The first 3 years were brutal. Darius took a $50,000 loan from his grandmother, her entire life savings money she'd earned cleaning houses for 40 years. He built his platform in his apartment, coding 18-hour days, living on ramen and determination. He launched with 3 small businesses in Philadelphia, manually processing every transaction, answering every customer service call himself. First-year revenue, $42,000. He paid himself nothing. Every dollar went back into the business. Year 2, he landed a partnership with a regional bank that brought 200 small business clients onto his platform. Revenue jumped to $1.2 million. He still paid himself nothing. He lived in the same apartment, ate the same food, wore the same clothes. Everything went back into growth. Year 3, his platform caught the attention of a larger fintech company. They made an acquisition offer, $15 million. Darius took it. Not because he wanted to cash out, but because he had bigger plans. He used that $15 million to start Bennett Capital Group, an investment fund focused on acquiring undervalued companies, restructuring them, growing their value, and either holding them for cash flow or selling them for multiples. It was the same model venture capitalists used, but Darius applied it to unsexy industries they ignored: manufacturing, logistics, regional real estate. At 28, he made his first major acquisition, a struggling manufacturing firm in Ohio. He restructured operations, installed better management, improved efficiency. Within 18 months, the company was profitable. He sold it for 3 times what he'd paid. By 30, he'd repeated that process 7 times. By 35, Bennett Capital Group managed a portfolio of 27 companies across multiple sectors, generating steady cash flow and growing in value. By 38, the firm managed $4.2 billion in assets. Darius personally held assets worth an estimated $680 million. He was known in finance circles as a shrewd operator, someone who found value. Others missed someone who moved quietly but effectively. He never forgot Gregory Harrison's face, the dismissive look, the quick judgment, the assumption that Darius didn't belong. And now, sitting in JFK Airport after being removed from Flight 828 after watching Captain Victoria Ashford look at him with that same dismissive expression, Darius felt the familiar burn. Different decade, different context, same assumption, same quick judgment, same treatment. But this time, Darius wasn't a 23-year-old with a borrowed suit and borrowed money. This time, he had options, resources, power, and patience. Captain Victoria Ashford had no idea what she'd just set in motion. 3 hours after Flight 828 departed, JFK Daniel Kim's video had 50,000 views on Twitter. 6 hours later, it was approaching 500,000. By morning, it had crossed 4 million. The algorithm loved it. The outrage was genuine. The footage was clear. You could see everything: Captain Ashford's dismissive tone, Darius's calm responses, the passengers protesting, the officers arriving the removal. It was a perfect storm of visible injustice. Nina's longer video, uploaded anonymously to Reddit's r/public freakout forum, added even more context. It captured the full confrontation from a different angle, showing Victoria's body language, her crossed arms, her condescending smile. The Reddit post got 100,000 upvotes in 6 hours and hit the front page by midnight. People started identifying the airline, the flight number, the captain's name. Internet sleuths matched Victoria's face to crew photos on the Apex Airlines website. Her full name appeared in comment threads. People started digging through social media, finding connections, building a profile. By 6 a.m. the next morning, national news outlets picked up the story. CNN ran it as their lead segment: Black investor illegally removed from first class, despite valid ticket. NBC followed Apex Airlines captain under fire for alleged racial profiling. The footage played on loop, soundtracked by expert commentary from civil rights lawyers and aviation industry analysts. The hashtag boycott Apex started trending. Within 12 hours, it was the number 2 trending topic in the United States, right behind a major sports event. Celebrities weighed in. A prominent actress with 12 million followers tweeted, "How is this still happening in 2024 at Apex Airlines? Needs to answer for this. Hashtag boycott." Apex. A famous athlete posted the video to Instagram with a simple caption, "This could be any of us." Civil rights organizations issued statements demanding investigations. The NAACP called for an immediate FAA review. The ACLU offered legal support. Passengers from Flight 828 started giving interviews. Lauren Mitchell appeared on CNN that afternoon. "I'm an attorney. I witnessed clear racial profiling. That man did nothing wrong. Nothing. And the captain removed him anyway." Daniel Kim spoke to NBC. "I recorded because I knew people needed to see this." Captain Ashford made no effort to hide her bias. She wanted everyone to see her exercise power. Apex Airlines' stock price dropped 8% in the first 2 days of trading after the incident. Ticket sales fell 22% over the weekend. Shareholder calls started flooding corporate headquarters. The morning after the incident, Darius called an emergency meeting at Bennett Capital Group headquarters in Lower Manhattan. The conference room on the 28th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district. The table was long, modern minimalist. Coffee and pastries sat untouched. Present at the table, Simone Carter, 41 black woman, executive assistant and chief of staff. Former investment banker at Morgan Stanley, recruited by Darius 8 years ago. She ran his schedule, managed his communications, and functioned as his strategic partner in all major decisions. She was wearing a sharp gray pantsuit and already had 3 legal pads filled with notes. Jonathan Price, 52, white man, lead corporate attorney. Harvard Law, 25 years, specializing in mergers, acquisitions, and hostile takeovers. He'd worked on some of the biggest corporate restructurings in recent history. Conservative navy suit, silver hair, reading glasses perched on his nose. Rachel Torres, 38, Hispanic woman, chief financial officer. Former hedge fund manager at Bridgewater Associates, expert in capital structure and acquisition financing. She had spreadsheets open on her laptop and a financial calculator next to her coffee. Marcus Webb, 45, black man, VP of Communications. Former investigative journalist at The Washington Post, recruited by Darius 5 years ago to handle media strategy and public relations. He was the only one in the room not wearing a suit, opting for jeans and a button-down shirt. Darius stood at the head of the table. "I want options. Not for a lawsuit. For acquisition." Jonathan looked up from his notes. "Acquisition of Apex Airlines." Darius shook his head. "Their parent company." "Who owns them?" Rachel was already pulling up data on her laptop. "Horizon Aviation Holdings. They own Apex Airlines, 2 regional carriers, and an aircraft maintenance subsidiary. Total market cap, $8.3 billion. Stock's been declining for 2 years, operational issues, customer satisfaction scores, dropping management conflicts." Darius leaned forward. "So, they're vulnerable." Rachel nodded. "Very. They're trading 14% below their 5-year average. Shareholders have been unhappy. Board is divided between reformers who want leadership change and old guard protecting status quo." Jonathan set down his pen. "You want to buy them?" Darius met his eyes. "I want controlling interest. Enough to restructure leadership and change policy." Simone spoke up. "That's going to cost." Rachel was already running numbers. "Approximately $4.1 billion for 51% controlling stake, assuming current market price, plus standard acquisition premium of 15 to 20%. Darius turned to her. "How much liquid capital do we have?" Rachel pulled up a different spreadsheet. "You personally have $680 million in net assets. The company has $1.2 billion in accessible capital. We'd need to leverage existing portfolio assets, secure financing from banking partners, and possibly bring in institutional investors who align with our strategy." Jonathan frowned. "This is an extremely ambitious move. Hostile takeovers of this size typically take months, sometimes years." You'll face resistance from current management, pushback from some shareholders, regulatory scrutiny. Darius's voice was calm but firm. Then we start now. Marcus leaned forward. The public narrative is on your side. This incident gives you moral authority. If we frame the acquisition as corporate accountability, cleaning up a company that enabled discrimination, you'll have public support and leverage with institutional investors who care about ESG metrics. Darius shook his head. I don't want this to be about revenge. It's about structural change. Jonathan nodded. Understood. But revenge is a powerful motivator for gathering allies. We'll need shareholders who want change, and your personal story gives them a rallying point. Rachel tapped her calculator. There are 3 major institutional investors who collectively own 22% of Horizon Aviation Holdings. All 3 have been pushing for leadership changes at annual meetings for the past 2 years. If we approach them as reformers offering real change, not just corporate raiders looking for profit, we might build a coalition. Simone made notes. We'll need a communications strategy that balances your personal experience with a broader vision for the company. Not just I was wronged, but this company needs fundamental restructuring to prevent this from happening to anyone. Marcus nodded. I can draft talking points for investor meetings and media appearances. We emphasize accountability, transparency, measurable outcomes. We're not just changing one policy, we're changing the culture. Darius looked around the table. Timeline. Rachel pulled up a project plan. Phase 1, begin quietly acquiring stock through multiple shell companies and investment vehicles. We stay below disclosure thresholds for as long as possible, 4 to 6 weeks. Phase 2, approach institutional investors, build coalition of shareholders who support leadership change. 2 months. Phase 3, secure financing for majority stake purchase. We'll need commitments from banks for $2 to $3 billion in acquisition loans using our portfolio as collateral. 1 month. Phase 4, cross-disclosure threshold at 30% ownership, announce intentions, publicly, call shareholder meeting. 1 week. Phase 5, shareholder vote, install new board, replace management. 2 weeks. Total timeline approximately 8 months. Jonathan looked at Darius. This is high risk. You'll be leveraging your entire portfolio. If something goes wrong, Darius cut him off. I know the risks. I also know the alternative is accepting that this keeps happening, that companies keep protecting bias, that people like Captain Ashford keep wielding power without consequences. I'm not accepting that. Simone closed her legal pad. Then let's get started. At Apex Airline's corporate headquarters in Atlanta. CEO, Gerald Morrison, 61. White, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide his panic, faced the worst crisis of his career. The boardroom on the executive floor was full of angry voices, competing priorities, and the growing realization that they'd badly underestimated the scale of this problem. The PR director, a woman named Karen Fields, 45, stood at a screen showing real-time social media analytics. We have a full-blown crisis. The video has 8 million views across all platforms. #BoycottApex is trending in the top 5 nationally. Ticket sales dropped 22% overnight. Our customer service lines are overwhelmed with cancellation requests and complaints. Gerald rubbed his temples. What's our liability exposure? The legal counsel. Thomas Wright, 52. White pulled up a document on his tablet. Captain Ashford violated company policy and federal aviation regulations. She had no grounds to remove the passenger. We're exposed to civil rights lawsuits, FAA investigations, possible Department of Transportation sanctions, and shareholder derivative suits if stock price continues dropping. A board member spoke up. What about the captain? Gerald hesitated. She's union protected, 23 years of service, senior pilot. We can't just terminate without following union procedures. Karen's voice got sharp. Then, follow the procedures. Fast. The public wants her fired. Every hour she remains employed, we lose credibility. Another board member interrupted. Put her on administrative leave immediately. Launch an internal investigation. Show we're taking it seriously. Thomas nodded. I recommend immediate paid leave pending investigation. We interview all witnesses, review cockpit recordings, examine her personnel file for prior complaints. Gerald looked uncomfortable. What if we find prior complaints? Then we have an even bigger problem, Thomas said flatly. Because it means we knew about a pattern and did nothing. The room went quiet. Karen broke the silence. We need a public statement within the hour. Short, direct, sincere. Acknowledge the incident, announce the investigation, commit to policy review. Gerald nodded. Draft it. Run it by me before release. 30 minutes later, Apex Airlines issued a statement on all platforms. Apex Airlines deeply regrets the incident aboard Flight 828. We are conducting a thorough investigation into the circumstances surrounding the passenger removal. Captain Victoria Ashford has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of this investigation. We are committed to treating all passengers with dignity and respect, and we will take appropriate action based on our findings. Public reaction was swift and negative. The statement was seen as weak, vague, insufficient. Comments flooded in administrative leave. She should be fired. Too little, too late. This is exactly why we're boycotting. The stock price dropped another 3% after the statement was released. In the boardroom, Gerald Morrison stared at the numbers and realized this wasn't going away. This was going to get worse before it got better. And somewhere in his gut, he had a feeling that the worst was still to come. Week 1. Bennett Capital Group began purchasing Horizon Aviation Holdings stock. Not large blocks that would trigger attention, but small amounts spread across dozens of shell companies, investment vehicles, and partner funds. A few thousand shares here, 10,000 there, always staying below the radar, never raising flags. Week 4. Jonathan Price approached the first institutional investor, Sterling Pension Fund, which held 8% of Horizon Aviation Holdings. He presented them with a detailed analysis showing leadership failures, declining performance, and a roadmap for reform under new management. The pension fund managers were skeptical at first, but they'd been frustrated with Horizon's board for years. They'd voted against management recommendations 3 times. They wanted change. Jonathan showed them the numbers the public support the momentum, and he showed them Darius, a proven operator, someone who'd turned around companies before, someone with both the capital and the credibility to make real change. Sterling Pension Fund agreed to support the acquisition. That was 8%. Week 8. Rachel Torres secured $2.1 billion in financing from a consortium of 3 major banks. The terms were aggressive. High interest rates, significant collateral requirements using Bennett Capital's entire portfolio. It was risky, but Darius had built enough credibility over 15 years that the banks believed he could execute the turnaround. Week 12. Bennett Capital Group and partner investors now owned 23% of Horizon Aviation Holdings, still below the 30% disclosure threshold. Still acquiring quietly, methodically, relentlessly. Week 20. Horizon stock continued declining. More customer service scandals emerged. 2 more discrimination complaints against Apex Airlines crew members made national news. The PR nightmare wouldn't end. Board members started receiving calls from angry shareholders demanding change. Week 24. Bennett Capital Group crossed 30% ownership. SEC disclosure was mandatory. The news broke across financial media. Investor removed from Apex Flight Now, major shareholder in parent company. Wall Street took immediate notice. Bloomberg ran the headline, Bennett Capital stages quiet takeover of troubled airline. Financial analysts speculated on air. This could be one of the most dramatic corporate restructurings we've seen in years. Week 32. 8 months after the incident on Flight 828, Bennett Capital Group and its coalition of partner investors achieved 51% ownership of Horizon Aviation Holdings. Controlling interest. The power to restructure the board. The authority to replace management. The ability to change everything. Darius called a mandatory shareholder meeting. The notice went out to all board members, all executives, all major shareholders. Location: Horizon Aviation. Holdings headquarters in Chicago. Date: 2 weeks from today. Purpose: board. Restructuring and executive leadership changes. And one more name on the attendance list added at Darius's personal request: Captain Victoria Ashford. She had no idea why she was being summoned. Legal counsel told her it was just a formality, a follow-up to the investigation. She was told to attend answer questions if asked, and everything would be fine. She believed them. She shouldn't have. The executive boardroom at Horizon Aviation Holdings headquarters occupied the entire 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, offering views of Lake Michigan to the east and the city skyline, stretching in all directions. The conference table was mahogany massive, seating 24. Screens lined the walls for remote participants. It was 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 8 months after Flight 828. The room filled slowly. Board members arrived first, taking their assigned seats, whispering to each other about what this emergency meeting was really about. They'd received the notice 2 weeks earlier, cryptic and official mandatory shareholder meeting, board restructuring and executive leadership review. CEO. Gerald Morrison sat near the head of the table, looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His expensive suit couldn't hide the weight loss, the dark circles under his eyes, the barely concealed anxiety. He knew the numbers. He knew Bennett Capital owned controlling interest. He just didn't know what was coming next. Remote shareholders joined via video conference, their faces appearing on the wall screens. Institutional investors, hedge funds, pension fund managers, all watching, all waiting. Witnesses started arriving. First Officer Derek Sullivan, wearing his Apex Airlines uniform, looking nervous. Officer Lisa Gonzalez from Airport Security in civilian clothes, clearly uncomfortable. Flight attendant Nina Rodriguez, also in civilian clothes, hands clasped in her lap. Passengers Lauren Mitchell and Daniel Kim, both dressed professionally, both looking determined. And then Captain Victoria Ashford walked in. She wore her Apex Airlines captain uniform, all 4 stripes gleaming on her shoulders, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in her signature sleek bun, her makeup perfect, her posture confident. She looked around the room with the casual authority of someone who'd spent 23 years being the most powerful person in whatever space she occupied. She was directed to a seat at the far end of the table, isolated from the other attendees. She sat down, crossing her legs, looking mildly annoyed at the inconvenience, but not worried. Legal counsel had told her this was routine. Just answer questions honestly. Everything will be fine. She glanced at the witnesses, Derek, Nina, the passengers, and her expression showed mild surprise, but not concern. She didn't recognize them immediately. It had been 8 months. She'd worked dozens of flights since then. They all blurred together. At 9:05 a.m., the double doors at the main entrance opened. Darius Bennett walked in, followed by Simone Carter and Jonathan Price. Darius wore a tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, burgundy tie. His shoes were polished. His presence was commanding without being aggressive, calm without being passive. Victoria saw him. Recognition crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her face went pale. Her confident posture faltered. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. She remembered. She remembered that night. She remembered his face. She remembered removing him from first class. She remembered the satisfaction she'd felt. Darius walked to the head of the table directly opposite Gerald Morrison. He didn't sit. He stood, hands resting lightly on the back of the chair, looking out at the assembled board members, executives, witnesses, and Victoria. The room went absolutely silent. "Good morning, Darius," said his voice carrying easily through the large space. "For those who don't know me, my name is Darius Bennett. I am the founder and CEO of Bennett Capital Group. 8 months ago, I was a passenger on Apex Airlines Flight 828 departing JFK to Los Angeles. I had a confirmed first-class seat, valid ticket, valid documentation. I had done nothing wrong." Every eye in the room turned to Victoria. She was frozen, staring at Darius like he was a ghost. Darius continued his tone, calm, measured, devastating. "I was removed from that flight by Captain Victoria Ashford, who decided based on nothing but her own bias that I didn't belong in first class. She questioned my ticket. She called security. She had me escorted off the plane in front of a cabin full of witnesses." He paused, letting the words settle. "Captain Ashford, do you remember that night?" Victoria's voice came out as a whisper. "Yes. Do you remember what you said to me?" Victoria's hands trembled. I was following protocol." Darius's voice got harder. "You told me I didn't fit the profile for first class. You implied my ticket was fraudulent despite having no evidence. You refused to listen to passengers who defended me. You called airport security and had me removed like I was a criminal. Do you remember that?" Victoria's voice broke. "I thought I made a mistake." "Yes," Darius said. "You did." Gerald Morrison tried to intervene, his voice shaking. "Mr. Bennett, this matter is under internal investigation. We've placed Captain Ashford on administrative leave. We're committed to." Darius cut him off with a single look. "Mr. Morrison, you're fired." The room erupted in whispers, gasps, shocked murmurs. Gerald half stood from his chair. "Excuse me." "You're fired," Darius repeated. "Effective immediately." Gerald's face flushed red. "You can't fire me. I'm the CEO of this company. I report to the board of directors, not to you." Darius reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document, sliding it across the table toward Gerald. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, I and my investment partners own 51% of Horizon Aviation Holdings. That gives me controlling interest in this company. And my first action as majority shareholder is removing you from executive leadership for failure to address discriminatory practices, failure to enforce company policy, and failure to protect this company's reputation and shareholders." Jonathan Price stepped forward carrying a tablet. "For the record, this action is supported by institutional investors representing an additional 18% of outstanding shares. That's 69% total shareholder consensus for leadership change. The votes have been counted and verified." A board member, one of the reformers who'd been trying to force change for years, spoke up. "I support this action. It's long overdue." 2 other board members nodded in agreement. Gerald Morrison stood, his face contorted with fury. "This is insane. You can't just walk in here and—" "Yes," Darius said quietly, "I can, and I am. Security will escort you from the building. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings. Your severance package is void due to violations of fiduciary duty outlined in your employment contract. Our legal team will be in touch regarding potential shareholder litigation." Gerald looked around the room for support, for allies, for anyone who would defend him. He found none. The board members who'd protected him were either gone or silent. The executives who'd enabled him were looking at their phones at the table at anything except him. 2 security officers appeared at the door. Gerald Morrison, shaking with rage and humiliation, walked out of the boardroom, his career ending exactly the way Darius's first-class experience had ended, escorted out under the watchful eyes of witnesses. Darius turned his attention to Victoria. She was still sitting at the far end of the table, tears streaming down her face, her confident facade completely shattered. "Captain Victoria Ashford," Darius said, and the room went silent again. "You are terminated from Apex Airlines effective immediately." Victoria started sobbing. "Please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was wrong. Please don't do this." Darius's voice didn't soften. "Your pilot's license has been flagged with the FAA for discriminatory conduct. The investigation will determine whether you keep your certification, but I can tell you this, you will never fly for any airline I have influence over. Your pension is forfeited under the conduct violation clause in your contract, and I've personally ensured that no commercial airline in the United States will hire you again." Victoria collapsed forward, her head in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. Her elegant appearance, her powerful presence, her commanding authority, all of it dissolved into grief and panic. Darius continued, "This isn't revenge, Captain. This is consequence. You wielded power irresponsibly. You used your authority to harm someone based solely on bias. You humiliated me in front of dozens of people because you decided in seconds that I didn't deserve respect. That ends now. For you and for anyone else who thinks their position gives them the right to treat people as less than human." Derek Sullivan. The first officer raised his hand hesitantly. "Mr. Bennett, I was on that flight. I questioned Captain Ashford's actions. I told her the ticket was valid. I filed a report after we landed." Darius looked at him and nodded. "I know. I read your report. You did the right thing even when it was uncomfortable, even when it could have cost you professionally. That matters." He turned to address the board. "Effective immediately. Derek Sullivan is promoted to captain. He'll undergo leadership training and take command of routes beginning next quarter." Derek's eyes widened. "Sir, Thank you." Officer Lisa Gonzalez. The airport security officer spoke up quietly. "Mr. Bennett, I was one of the officers who removed you. I want to apologize. I knew it was wrong. I should have refused." Darius met her eyes. "You expressed hesitation. You apologized afterward. You showed conscience even while following orders you didn't agree with. I'm recommending you for commendation from the Airport Authority for Integrity Under Pressure." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Darius turned to Nina Rodriguez, the flight attendant who'd recorded everything. "Nina, you risked your job to document what happened. You uploaded that video knowing you might be fired. You refused to stay silent." Nina nodded, unable to speak. "You're promoted to Senior Flight Operations Supervisor," Darius said. "You'll oversee staff conduct training across all Apex Airlines routes. You'll have authority to investigate complaints and flag crew members for review. You'll report directly to the new Vice President of Passenger Experience, and you'll help build the accountability structure this company should have had all along." Nina broke down crying. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Darius looked at Lauren Mitchell and Daniel Kim. "You both spoke up when others stayed silent. You documented what happened. You offered help when it would have been easier to look away. The new leadership team will be in touch about consulting opportunities for policy development." Lauren nodded. "We're ready to help however we can." Darius addressed the full board. "Horizon Aviation Holdings is under new leadership as of today. Here's what changes immediately." He pulled up a presentation on the wall screens. "First, independent oversight. We're partnering with civil rights organizations to create an external review board with authority to investigate all passenger removal cases. Any crew member's decision can be challenged and overturned if it lacks clear documented cause. Passengers will have direct access to this board, bypassing company HR. Second, mandatory training. Every employee at every level undergoes anti-bias training. Pilots, flight attendants, gate agents, executives, everyone. No exceptions, no grandfather clauses. Recertification required every 18 months. Third, transparency in complaints. All discrimination complaints will be published in quarterly public reports. Crew members with multiple complaints will be flagged for investigation. 3 verified complaints result in termination. No union protection for discriminatory conduct. 4th Passenger Bill of Rights. Clear, specific criteria for removal will be documented and posted in every cabin. Passengers removed without valid cause will receive $10,000 minimum compensation. Video recording by passengers is explicitly permitted and encouraged. 5th New Executive Leadership. I'm appointing Simone Carter as CEO of Horizon Aviation Holdings. Rachel Torres will serve as CFO. We're conducting external searches for Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion with board-level authority and direct reporting to the CEO. He paused, looking around the room. This company will no longer profit from policies that enable discrimination. We will set the industry standard for equity, dignity, and respect. Not because it's good PR, because it's the right thing to do. The board members who supported reform broke into applause. The ones who didn't looked at each other, calculating their next moves, knowing the old guard was finished. Darius looked one more time at Victoria, who was still crying, mascara running down her face, her perfect appearance destroyed. She had nothing left, no job, no career, no dignity, just the consequences of her choices. Darius felt no satisfaction in her suffering, but he felt certainty in the necessity of it. Some lessons could only be learned through loss. Some people only understood power when they lost it. He gathered his documents and walked out of the boardroom, Simone and Jonathan following. Behind him, the room buzzed with voices, with shock, with the realization that something fundamental had just changed. Victoria sat alone at the end of the table, surrounded by empty chairs, her sobs the only sound anyone could hear. Within the first week of Darius taking control, he ordered a comprehensive audit of Horizon Aviation Holdings and all subsidiary companies. Every passenger complaint from the past 5 years, every crew disciplinary action, every incident marked as resolved, every settlement agreement, everything. The audit team worked around the clock, pulling files, reviewing recordings, interviewing former employees, analyzing patterns. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Captain Victoria Ashford's personnel file revealed 17 passenger complaints over 8 years. 14 involved passengers of color. All were documented as resolved internally with no details about investigation or findings. She'd never been disciplined, never been suspended, never faced consequences. The union protected her. Her seniority protected her. Her consistent flight schedules and clean safety record protected her. 3 of those complaints were nearly identical to what happened to Darius passengers of color removed from first class, despite valid tickets accused of fraud, without evidence questioned about how they could afford premium seats. But Victoria wasn't alone. The audit found a pattern across Apex Airlines that revealed how deeply the problem ran. Over 5 years, there were 340 documented passenger removals from flights. 68% involved passengers of color, despite passengers of color representing only 32% of first-class customers. Most removals were coded as disruptive behavior or non-compliance, but detailed incident reports were suspiciously missing. Video footage that should have been archived was often deleted or unavailable. Gate agents and flight attendants who'd objected to questionable removals reported facing retaliation. Poor shift assignments, negative performance reviews denied promotions. 3 had been fired for insubordination after questioning crew decisions. The most damaging discovery came from HR records. Former CEO Gerald Morrison and VP of Operations. Richard Brennan, 57 white, had actively suppressed discrimination complaints for years. Complaints filed with HR were archived in a separate database that wasn't accessible to the legal team or reviewed during audits. When passengers threatened legal action, the company offered quick settlements, usually $5,000 to $15,000, with strict non-disclosure agreements. Over 3 years, Apex Airlines had paid $2. $3 million in discrimination settlements. All confidential, all buried, all forgotten. Until Angela Reeves came forward. Angela was a 44-year-old black woman who'd worked as an HR director at Apex Airlines for 6 years. She'd watched complaint after complaint disappear into the archive. She'd been told by senior management not to investigate certain cases. She'd been ordered to prepare settlement offers for passengers before investigations were completed. She'd hated it. She'd documented everything, and she'd waited for leadership that would care. When Darius took over, Angela contacted Simone Carter directly. "I kept a shadow file," she said, sliding a USB drive across the desk. "Every complaint they buried, I saved. Every investigation they killed, I documented. Every passenger they paid off, I tracked. I knew someday someone would care enough to look." The drive contained 127 detailed complaint files, passenger statements, crew statements, video footage Angela had secretly copied, email chains showing executives ordering HR to suppress investigations, text messages between managers coordinating stories. A complete record of institutional failure. Darius read through every file. Each one was a person who'd been humiliated, dismissed, erased. Each one was a moment the company chose profit and reputation over justice. Each one was evidence that what happened to him wasn't an isolated incident. It was policy dressed up as individual judgment. The first 90 days under new leadership were transformative and brutal. Darius and his team didn't just change policies. They changed the culture from the ground up. 8 of 11 board members were replaced. The old guard, the ones who'd protected Gerald Morrison, the ones who'd voted against reform measures year after year, were voted out. New board members included civil rights lawyers, customer experience experts, former airline executives with clean records, and representatives from institutional investors. The entire C-suite was restructured. VP of Operations. Richard Brennan was fired within the first week, escorted out by security, his severance package voided for enabling misconduct. The general counsel who'd drafted those settlement NDAs was replaced. The chief marketing officer who'd issued weak PR responses was gone. Operational changes came fast. Every Apex Airlines employee underwent 40 hours of mandatory anti-bias training. Not the standard corporate diversity module with slides and multiple-choice quizzes. Real training led by external experts from civil rights organizations based on real incidents, including Darius's case and the others uncovered in the audit. Employees watched videos. They role-played difficult situations. They confronted their own biases in facilitated discussions. Quarterly refreshers became mandatory. Miss a training session, lose your flight privileges until you complete it. A new reporting system was implemented. Anonymous hotline for crew members to report bias or misconduct. Passengers could submit complaints via app, website, or phone call, all tracked in a public database with case numbers and resolution timelines. Every complaint required a response within 48 hours, an investigation within 2 weeks, and a public report of findings within 30 days. A 3-strike accountability policy went into effect. First verified complaint of discriminatory behavior, mandatory retraining, and written warning. Second complaint suspension without pay and full investigation. Third complaint termination, no exceptions, no union protection for bias-based conduct. Passenger compensation became standard. Every passenger wrongly removed from a flight received $10,000 minimum plus lifetime flight credits. Every passenger who'd received a settlement with an NDA in the past 3 years was offered an additional $25,000 to void the NDA and speak publicly if they chose. Darius personally reached out to victims from the past 5 years whose complaints had been buried. 43 people received phone calls, apologies, compensation, and offers to participate in policy development committees. The changes at Horizon Aviation Holdings and Apex Airlines sent shockwaves through the entire aviation industry. Other airlines watched nervously, knowing their own policies would be scrutinized. Media coverage was relentless. Financial analysts discussed the case in earnings calls. Business schools began developing case studies. Delta Airlines announced policy reviews within 2 weeks of Darius's takeover. United Airlines formed a passenger experience task force. American Airlines updated training protocols. Southwest Airlines launched an independent complaint review board. The FAA announced an industry-wide audit of passenger removal procedures, citing the Apex Airlines case as evidence of widespread issues requiring regulatory oversight. The Department of Transportation proposed new regulations requiring transparent complaint reporting, third-party investigations of bias allegations, and financial penalties for airlines with documented patterns of discrimination. 3 senators introduced federal legislation called the Passenger Dignity Act. It required clear standards for removal, independent oversight of complaints, penalties for airlines with discrimination patterns, and protections for whistleblowers. Media started calling it Bennett's Law. Civil rights organizations partnered with Horizon Aviation Holdings to develop model policies for the transportation industry. The NAACP, the ACLU, and other groups sent representatives to consult on training programs, oversight structures, and accountability measures. Corporate responsibility movements in other industries took notice. Hospitality companies reviewed front desk policies after viral incidents at hotels. Retail chains audited security practices after complaints about racial profiling. Restaurant groups examined reservation and seating systems after stories of discriminatory treatment. Darius's case became more than a personal story. It became a catalyst for change across multiple sectors. At a press conference 3 months after taking control of Horizon Aviation Holdings, Darius stood in front of cameras and reporters and spoke directly to the questions everyone was asking. This was never about one flight, one captain, or one airline, he said. It's about systems that protect bias and punish those who speak up. I had resources to fight back. Most people don't. That's why these changes must be permanent, structural, and enforceable. A reporter asked, "Do you think other airlines will follow your lead?" Darius looked directly into the camera. They don't have a choice. Passengers are watching, shareholders are watching, the public is demanding accountability. Any company that continues protecting discrimination will face the same consequences we're imposing here. Change or die. It's that simple. Another reporter, "What do you say to people who think this is just about revenge?" Darius paused. If my experience can prevent one person from being humiliated, one family from being separated, one human being from being treated as less than, then every dollar, every hour, every fight was worth it. Call it whatever you want. I call it justice. The press conference video went viral, reaching 12 million views in the first week. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of discrimination, their own experiences of being profiled, their own moments of humiliation on planes, in hotels, in stores, in spaces they'd paid to occupy. Darius had given them a voice, and more importantly, he'd proven that speaking up could lead to real change, not just performative apologies and forgotten promises. 6 months after Darius Bennett took control of Horizon Aviation Holdings, Apex Airlines looked nothing like the company that had humiliated him. The first-class cabin on every aircraft now featured small placards mounted on the bulkhead walls, elegant black letters on brushed steel. This seat belongs to whoever earned it, no exceptions. In the crew training facility in Atlanta, a large photograph hung in the main corridor, where every new hire passed during orientation. It showed Darius sitting calmly in seat 2A on that night 8 months earlier, taken from security footage just before his removal. Beneath the photo, a quote in clean sans serif font, "Dignity is not negotiable." Every pilot, every flight attendant, every gate agent walked past that image on their first day and heard instructors explain what happened, why it mattered, and why it would never happen again. Nina Rodriguez led training sessions 3 times a week, standing in front of rooms full of crew members, role-playing difficult situations, teaching people how to question their instincts, how to recognize bias in real time, how to speak up when something felt wrong. Former passengers from Flight 828, Lauren Mitchell, Daniel Kim. Others came as guest speakers sharing what they'd witnessed and why they'd chosen to act. Derek Sullivan, now a captain, told new pilots, "Authority without accountability is just another word for tyranny." Victoria never flew again. Her pilot's license was suspended by the FAA pending investigation, then permanently revoked after findings confirmed a pattern of discriminatory conduct over multiple years. She filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Apex Airlines claiming union violations and lack of due process. The suit was dismissed when judges reviewed the evidence. 17 complaints, video footage, witness statements, and her own words caught on recording. She tried working for private aviation companies. All declined after background checks revealed her employment history. She tried consulting work for corporate flight departments. They passed. She tried teaching at flight schools. Nobody would hire her. She gave one interview to a local Chicago news station attempting to rehabilitate her image. She said she'd been following protocol, that she'd been made a scapegoat for political correctness, that she was the real victim of an overreaction. The interview aired once went viral online and destroyed what little sympathy anyone might have had for her. Viewers saw no remorse, no accountability, only defensiveness and denial. Last known employment administrative assistant at her husband's commercial real estate firm in Westchester. Her salary was a fraction of what she'd earned as a senior captain. Her elegant, commanding presence, once intimidating in cockpits and cabin aisles, now reduced to answering phones and filing documents. The fall was complete. Darius continued running Bennett Capital Group with Simone Carter serving as CEO of Horizon Aviation Holdings. He rarely gave interviews, preferring action over attention, results over recognition. But the changes he'd forced into existence spread beyond one company. Passengers who'd witnessed the confrontation on Flight 828 received personal thank you notes from Darius, handwritten specific to their actions. You spoke up when silence was easier. You recorded when looking away was comfortable. You stood for justice when it cost you nothing to sit down. That matters. That changes the world. The actual aircraft that had been Flight 828 was retired from service and donated to the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. It became part of a permanent exhibit on civil rights in modern commerce. Seat 2, the seat Darius had been removed from, bore a small brass plaque. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, watches, and moves when the moment demands it. I need to talk to you directly about what this story means not just to Darius Bennett, but to all of us watching it unfold. When I first researched this case, it stopped me cold. Not because discrimination on airlines is rare, sadly it happens far too often. What stopped me was what came next. Darius didn't just sue the company. He didn't just accept a settlement and move on. He bought the entire operation and restructured it from the foundation up. That's not revenge. That's revolution. Here's what I want you to take from this. When someone tries to diminish you, erase you, humiliate you, you have a choice. You can shrink into that pain, or you can grow beyond it. Darius grew. He transformed his humiliation into a blueprint for change that affected millions of people. I've been in rooms where people looked at me and decided I didn't belong before I even opened my mouth. I've had my credentials questioned, my presence, challenged my right to be there, debated. It burns. It stays with you. You carry it. And you have to decide what you do with that fire. Darius teaches us channel it. Don't let it consume you, but don't ignore it either. Use it. Build something so undeniable that the people who doubted you have to reckon with their mistake. Build something that makes sure what happened to you can't happen to the next person. And to everyone watching who's never been questioned like that, who's never had someone look at you and decide you're in the wrong place, pay attention to the passengers on Flight 828. Some recorded, some spoke up, some threatened lawsuits, some did nothing. Which one were you? Which one will you be next time? because there will be a next time. Bias doesn't disappear because one CEO got fired or one captain lost her job. It lives in assumptions, in quick judgments, in the automatic calculations people make when they see someone who doesn't match their expectations. The only way it changes is if people with power refuse to enable it, and people witnessing it refuse to stay silent. Lauren Mitchell could have stayed in her seat. She was a lawyer. She knew she could bill out at $800 an hour defending corporate clients. She didn't need this fight. But she stood up anyway. Daniel Kim could have kept his phone in his pocket. He had his own business, his own problems, his own flight to catch. But he recorded anyway. Nina Rodriguez could have kept her job safe, stayed quiet, looked away like she'd done before. But she documented everything and risked her career. Those choices mattered as much as Darius's billions. Because change doesn't come from one person at the top. It comes from everyone, at every level, refusing to accept what's wrong just because it's normal. If you believe dignity isn't negotiable, share this story. If you believe one person's courage can reshape an entire industry, hit that subscribe button. If you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere you earned the right to be, don't just prove them wrong. Change the system so nobody after you has to fight that same battle. Your voice matters. Your witness matters. Your choice to speak up or stay silent matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Subscribe, like, share. But most importantly, stand up every single time. Because silence in the face of injustice makes you part of the problem. Now go out there and be the person who records. Be the person who objects. Be the person who stands when sitting would be easier. Be the person who changes the world one moment of courage at a time.